tackling the mystery of long COVID. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English, the best place for you to build your English listening skills with current events. On today's lesson, we're going to explore the phenomenon known as long COVID. Most people recover from COVID-19 after a few weeks, but around 10 to 15% of COVID patients have lingering symptoms that can make it hard or even impossible to work for months afterward. We'll talk about a very popular English expression, for a living, and JR has a song of the week. Speaking of JR, he has posted the full transcript and the rest of today's lesson online at plainenglish.com/373. COVID news has been dominated by positivity rates, hospitalization rates, vaccination rates, lockdowns, curfews, reopening, travel restrictions, social distancing, masks, and much more. But lost among the headlines is another aspect of this new disease, something known as long COVID. The term long COVID is used to describe the approximately 10% of COVID sufferers whose symptoms do not go away within a few weeks. A person with long COVID has mostly recovered physically. It's not difficult to breathe, and the fever is gone. But fatigue and brain fog can persist for months after the physical symptoms recede. Part of the difficulty of diagnosing and treating long COVID is defining it. One survey asked thousands of patients what symptoms they were experiencing. The survey respondents identified over 200 distinct symptoms, so it's hard to catalog them all. But symptoms tend to fall in three categories. First, some patients report difficulty breathing after performing small tasks. Other patients say they suffer heart palpitations, dizziness, or difficulty with digestion. And finally, some patients experience brain fog. The last one is perhaps the most puzzling. When a person suffers from brain fog, that person has difficulty concentrating and thinking clearly. Over time, the physical symptoms like body aches tend to fade. But even 22 weeks after diagnosis, long COVID sufferers said the mental health symptoms were getting worse, not better. Survey respondents said they had trouble focusing, were absent-minded, had trouble forming and remembering words, suffered from sensitivity to alcohol, and experienced hair loss. Patients with brain fog can have trouble solving problems. Some get in the car to go somewhere only to forget where they were supposed to go. They have a difficult time holding down a job, especially in industries that require them to concentrate. One radio journalist said she often gets stuck in the middle of a sentence, unable to find the right word, and that's someone who talks for a living. A survey in Britain showed that a third of long COVID patients suffered financially, and over 80% said they were having a hard time working. For a long time, the scientific community was focused on treating the most urgent symptoms. But scientists are now beginning to study long COVID sufferers, hoping to find ways to alleviate the mental health symptoms. Specialized clinics are looking at existing treatments for brain trauma and strokes to see if they can help. There are a few theories about what causes these chronic symptoms. One theory posits that some patients' immune systems overcompensate when fighting COVID symptoms. As a result, the theory says inflammation continues even after COVID has been solved. That inflammation can prevent the brain from getting the oxygen it needs to operate properly. Another theory suggests the virus lingers in some patients, causing continual damage. Another possibility is that the initial coronavirus infection caused lasting nerve damage. None of the theories has yet been proven, and there is no cure. However, scientific clinics are at least helping people manage their symptoms better. For example, some scientists are adapting existing tools that help stroke victims recover their mental abilities. Tools include mindfulness training and video games that seek to help patients rebuild their concentration skills. Just as a patient with a physical disability needs to go through physical therapy, long COVID sufferers have to go through some mental exercises. Cognitive rehab can help patients identify their shortcomings and work around them. Some researchers are developing video games that can be played at home, but the effectiveness of these techniques is not clear. For the moment, the existing therapies are all about managing the symptoms and making daily life easier. There is no cure for long COVID. Patients in rehab report some improvement in their lives, but only a small percentage say they recover completely. Even awareness is limited among doctors. Many patients with these symptoms are not properly diagnosed, so they bounce from clinic to clinic in search of answers. A really tough thing about this is that so many people with long COVID are in the working prime years of their life. That would make it extremely hard to get back to work. Imagine having to miss months at a time just because you can't concentrate. And I have a feeling, too, that the vast majority of cases are undiagnosed. Hey, a quick plug for Plain English Plus, our membership program. We designed it as the perfect companion to Plain English. Almost everything in Plain English Plus begins with the content in our lesson, the one you're listening to right now. And we use the content of the lesson to help you build other skills in English. We have listening exercises. They're from the lesson contents. Pronunciation exercises, again, from the lesson contents. There's a quiz, too, based on the text of the lesson, and we have a how-to video that expands on something you hear in the lesson. Now, today's how-to video is about how to describe something that happens over a longer period of time. One thing I learned in Spanish is that I tend to do better on exercises when I'm already engaged with a topic. And that's why all of our exercises and tools at Plain English Plus start with the main lesson. So if that's of interest to you, come check us out at plainenglish.com/plus, Plus. Today's expression is an easy one. This is almost like a day off for you. That's how easy this expression is. Well, this may be an easy expression to understand, but you absolutely need to know how to use it in English. And the expression is for a living. Living ends in ing, but in this case, it's a noun. What you do for a living is your primary source of income. In today's lesson, you heard that patients who suffer from long COVID can experience brain fog. One symptom of brain fog is not being able to find the right word. I gave an example of one person who couldn't find the right word. She is a radio journalist. She talks for a living. If your business, your career, your primary way of making money is talking on the radio, then you can't afford to lose your place and be unable to form a sentence or find the right word. Before the pandemic, a lot of people moved to New York to try to make it in live theater. It's a difficult life for a young actor. All the auditions, callbacks, hearing no over and over. It's hard to make a living as an actor in New York. Most of the people that you see on stage at smaller theaters, they don't perform for a living. Yes, they make some money for their performance, but most actors, and I'm not talking about the famous ones on Broadway, but most actors do something else for a living, and they perform at night. A lot work in restaurants, retail, and the hospitality industry because the hours are flexible. What does that actor do for a living? He works in hospitality, but he performs at night. What do you do for a living? That's what you might say if you want to know a person's career. I would caution you that this is a somewhat direct way of asking the question, how do you make money? It's a little more polite to say, what do you do for work? Or what's your career? Or simply, what do you do? If you add for a living, at least to me, you're asking a little too directly how they make money. However, it's common to use for a living when talking about someone that's not in the conversation. For example, you might ask, what does her husband do for a living? Or, I wonder what that guy does for a living. Here are a few variations on this expression. She makes a good living means that someone earns a relatively high income. You might describe a friend who started a business that is now successful. She makes a good living selling software to large companies. She makes a lot of money doing that. You can use this to say that it's difficult to make a comfortable income doing a certain activity. For example, it's hard to make a living selling used cars these days. The market is getting more competitive and more consumer-friendly, as we've discussed. Well, that's great if you're buying a used car. But if you're working in a car dealership selling the cars, it's another story. It's hard to make a living selling used cars. It's certainly possible, and some people do make a good living in car sales, but that's becoming increasingly difficult with all the online tools. Earn a living is another variant. He can barely earn a living with his acting career. I think it's time for him to try something else. That means he can just barely make ends meet with his acting career. He doesn't have much money left over. He does earn a living. He does make enough money, but he doesn't have much left over. I used to do a lot of business travel before COVID. That's a tough way to earn a living. That means it's difficult to work in that environment. That's a tough way to make your money. Some people love it. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. But it's a tough way to earn a living. Alarm at 4 o'clock a.m. on a Monday morning, taxis, hotels, restaurant meals, interrupted sleep, always in a new place. It's a tough way to earn a living, and I prefer working at home. Today's song of the week is Amsterdam by Gregory Alan Isakov. It's from the album The Weatherman and is inspired by the singer's travels to the Netherlands. In the lyrics, he sings about his silhouette, which is his shadow. He says his shadow will follow me down every street, no matter what my crime. Amsterdam by Gregory Alan Isakov is today's song of the week. Thank you, JR. And that's all for today. I listened to Gregory Alan Isakov a few years ago and really liked it. I think I was listening on a road trip or something. I'll have to go back and listen to the rest of that Weatherman album. Speaking of Weatherman, do you remember I said I was holding out hope for a good Memorial Day weekend? It was freezing the first day. I was under a blanket on Friday night. It was so cold, but it gradually got better, and I even got outside to enjoy the sun, even if it didn't quite feel like summer. Well, remember, the rest of this lesson, including a full transcript, is available at plainenglish.com/373, and we'll be back next Monday with another lesson. See you then.